Okay, and we're live.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the free Assange online vigil series number 11.0. I'm Taylor Hudak, and I'm joined with my co-hosts Andrew Smith, Christy Duff, and Steve Poikonen. So tonight we'll open Davey Lot 4, even joined by a very special guest, Kendra Christian. Kendra is a sales manager in Colorado, and she is also the founder of Free Assange Denver. I had the pleasure of meeting her this summer when I was out in Denver, and we kind of held a little protest together, and it was great to kind of talk to her and also the others that are involved in the Free Assange movement a little bit out west. So Kendra, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that you are new to activism, you said. Can you kind of explain what really got you started in this movement?
Yeah, well, really, it was probably, I'd say maybe a month or a little bit more before Julian Assange was arrested that I found the Unity for J vigils. So that's really, that's part of it. That was a huge thing for me to find those because up until then, you just kind of feel like maybe you're the only one seeing stuff that's going on, aside from a few friends. So that was really great to find. And, what happened is the whole propaganda to make Assange look scruffy and all these things when he was taken out of the embassy, that had like the exact opposite effect on me where I was just like, oh my God, what has happened here? And that's really what kind of spurred that for me. And I was looking around, after that, I'm like, where's there a group? What's going on? What can I do? Emailing, press organizations, just trying to find things. And then, it just there was just one of those moments where I was like, well, I'm here. So I guess, I must be the one. I'm going to start this. And so I did. I remember I found, it was actually San Francisco. I found their website and was able to send them an email, and then they got back to me. That's how I found Discord. And, and then it just kind of took off from there. My first rally, I had even sent a thing on Discord that was, hey, it might just be me. Is that okay? Is that, bad press or whatever? Because I was so nervous. And so, I just did it. And I wasn't alone the first rally. We had 5 people. And, I think that's just kind of how all these things start. And now we're just growing. Every rally we have more people. We're getting more core supporters. And, it's a good thing, just getting the word out there. And so that's kind of how I got started in things. And then we did the Twitter, which is what we're most active on. And we're working on a website right now as well, which isn't quite up yet, but we're hoping that will kind of be a base to get other states working together in unison to do some actions, with everybody's calling Congress at the same time, things like that to just make us notice. So yeah, that's
So
how
I
it
know,
started.
awesome. So I do want to talk about Jimmy Dore, because I know that you guys kind of did what Andrew and I did, which was awesome, where you kind of, rallied outside prior to the show beginning. But before you get into that, can you talk a little bit about how you overcame this sort of like fear or maybe nervousness that you had? Because I think many people who just get started in activism feel this way. So do you have any advice for people that are maybe sharing that same feeling?
Yeah, just do it. Anything. One of my favorite things is by G.K. Chesterton, and it's anything worth doing is worth doing badly. It's to just do it. That you're not alone. There are, every time you're standing out there with a sign, there's probably somebody else out there somewhere else. And I think that's the big thing is that people, just kind of feel alone out there with their views, and you're not. You just have to get out, get active, and people will come, So, and email us. You can email us, and I'll help you with starting a rally, or Unity for J. So.
So I know that you were obviously, like I mentioned earlier, at the Jimmy Dore show. And one of our frequent viewers, Miss Joss, was there as well. And I've spoken with her. Can you talk about how you guys all got together and sort of what that whole event was like?
Yeah, well, it was funny because she had that idea. You know, we connected, and she was, you know, she loves Jimmy Dore, and I mean, all of us do. And you know, so it was her idea. She's like, well, we should do something. You know, I'm going to be up there in Denver for the Jimmy Dore show, and maybe we should do something outside. And so that's kind of how that idea started. And then you guys had that success, and oh my gosh, anybody who's doing anything, that's a great way to start, is go to a Jimmy Dore show. We got over 100 signatures. I mean, we were holding up the line for people to sign our email list. That's how interested people were. So it was a great experience. We had a rally earlier that day, and then there were about, I think, 6 of us that went to the show, and 3 of us beforehand that were, you know, handing out flyers and getting email addresses. And so it was awesome. A lot of interest. And then, you know, and then the show was great too. There's nothing like a room full of people chanting all wars bullshit. So it was great.
Those shows like that and like Lee Camp shows and Ron Placone shows are just great reminders that we're not alone and we're not crazy in fighting for this. So like when we went outside of Taylor and I went outside of the show in Chicago for Jimmy Dore, it was like everyone there agreed. And that was just the coolest part. And it's just trying to get those people inspired to do what you've done and step outside your comfort zone and start organizing. So what were some of the big things, like some of the successes that you saw early on, aside from just that first rally?
Well, I think some of it, with the first rally, you know, that was a big deal too. And I think I knew people that were supporters already. And so I think some of it is just having something there to organize, you know, just getting it started, and then people will start to come. Another big success that I had early on was that who's a great supporter now. I was on Twitter. It's Twisted Politics. He's part of the Denver Action to Free Assange. And I had just sent out a flyer, and then all of a sudden there was somebody on Twitter that was just helping me out, you know, like resending my flyer and tagging all of these news organizations and doing things like that. And that, so that was great. Met him at a rally, you know, and met more people that were into activism and that could help out. So.
Oh crap! Sorry, I was muted. What do you get to talk about when you go and do actual activism? Like, how do you broach people who haven't maybe had access to the information or gone out of their way to avoid it, as the case may be? Like, because we're always trying to find different and new and you know, if need be, better ways to engage with people.
Well, I think, so what we've been doing is I got this idea from Steve McMaster. You know, he had made those info boards, and so we bring those with us, and that draws attention because that kind of gives us a presence where we are, aside from having, you know, our big signs out and everything like that. And then we have flyers to hand out to people too. So even if a lot of times people who maybe they don't want to stop, you know, they don't know what it's about, whatever, they'll still take a flyer. And our experience when we have, you know, people there is we really follow the same premise as Unity for J, which is, you know, no politics. And there's just something more important going on here, our free press, our free speech, which is huge. You know, it's pretty insane when you're trying to talk to somebody about free speech and, you know, and they don't have time. It's like, well, you're going to have time, but it's going to be too late. But we've had a lot of success with that. We really haven't, you know, I haven't run into any situations like I know that Christy did, which I'm grateful for. Just more if people aren't interested, but the flyers have been a good way. You know, we're also trying to explore, you know, what can we do to get people more active and more engaged? And for us, it's really to me, it's trying to figure out a way to get people out of that mainstream media, mindset, even just introducing the question about like, well, why haven't things been getting better for, 50 years? Could it be because we don't have an active fourth estate, that's disappearing more and more? And I think now after that, we have 2 rallies coming up, but another thing that we've been doing is going to other organizations, so people who are already active, and trying to get those people involved as well. So other outreach, and we've had some success with that too, just because these are groups that are already active and caring about something. And, our message to them is like, hey, what you're doing right now, what you care about the most, this is going to go away. You're going to have no chance to fight for this without a free press. And so that's one thing that our group is doing, is trying to reach out, our individual group members, even to other groups that they're already in, just to get ours growing.
That's awesome, because we preach the cross-pollination too. Insofar as getting out and getting involved in other protests. Andrew and Taylor went to a 4th of July fireworks thing and passed out cake and information. There's a lot to, I think there's a lot to be accomplished by reaching out to people who, like you said, are already active and already involved in something. And when you make the point that absolutely none of this can happen without a free press, it hopefully has the desired amount of weight.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So Kendra, you have a couple of our viewers have questions for you. And this is coming from Sherry Clayton, and she wanted to know which flyers you pass out. And then also we have another question from Dak Rouleau, but I'll let you answer that first question about the flyers.
Okay, so the flyers that we've been passing out, actually we got from the group in San Francisco. So they completely helped us out. They sent us like, hey, here's some informational handouts that we've been using. So we did that. We, we modified to put our information in there and then added some things. But yeah, so we got them there, and I am so happy to share that or anything that we do with anybody.
Okay, and then we have another question from Dak Rouleau. He is asking, is it possible to make people care about the First Amendment if they don't care about it already? And I guess anybody could jump in, but Kendra, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I mean, I guess part of the thing is that you can't make people do anything, and I think people are used to being oppressed. So I think part of it is just introducing ideas to people, maybe just explaining the First Amendment, how things, I think you have to try. I think that's the point, is to try. And I think that once people take for granted what the free press is, and our rights here, but really without the First Amendment and really without the teeth of the free press, even the other rights within the First Amendment disappear. So, I would say, I don't know if you can make anybody, but it's definitely.
Yeah, I tend to think too that, I'm sorry, Chrissy, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just going to say, I know we've talked about this a little bit as activists on the US side. I just wanted to get your opinion on, it seems like the activism in the US for Julian Assange has been a little bit slow to build up. What your thoughts are on that, and how important it is for US activists to get involved, even though everything's happening in London and the UK, but why it's important to start building activists here specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly important. I mean, just for honestly, even if you just completely despise Assange, it's like, well, this is your free press. This is your First Amendment. I'm not sure why. I mean, well, I can speculate as to why it's so low. Obviously, you see, I mean, really any mass movements that you see are pretty much, they're not grassroots, they're coming from somewhere else. It's not, it's not legit. And then I think people in the US are disassociated from politics. I don't know, in my school, I mean, we were sort of taught about civics and government, but not anywhere near to the extent that people used to be taught about it. So I think that they just, in a lot of ways, just don't know and or feel like they can't do anything, when in reality, a really small number of dedicated people can do things. And then I think part of it too is maybe just not knowing about it. Like for me, I was out there looking for a group, and I think I would say too, for anybody who's getting started, that's another thing to keep in mind, is that there are probably other people out there looking for things. It's just not up, it's just not there. And yeah, so that's part of what we're hoping to get this website up soon, and that will maybe attract some more people. I know a lot of our supporters weren't on Twitter, and so they found us through a meetup. I guess I should add that we put a meetup in, and that helped a lot too. And then some of our, getting people from different areas that weren't even on social media, because I also think that a lot of people who do support us and this are just disconnected,
Diversifying social media profiles is super important too. Like Reddit, for example, they have, most people on Reddit are there to earn internets. Like there's a literal currency within Reddit. It's not like a paid currency, but like it's literally your score inside of the internet. So you can use social medias like that to get people to engage individually, or to start posting and get them to engage with your group specifically for your area. Like the WikiLeaks actual subreddit, it's really active, but there's not that many big posts. So once people start putting protest posts and things like that up in there, it gets moved to the top really quickly, even with all the censorship and bots and stuff like that. So diversifying across multiple platforms, or even just working with other people that use those platforms so you don't have to have your own account, may be a really, really big tool for getting more people involved too.
So also,
Right.
In the chat, Miss Jocelyn gave a shout out to you, Kendra. She said, shout out to Kendra from Jocelyn in Durango. I reached out to Kendra and she really inspired and encouraged me to action. So that really shows that you're being very effective. But we do have a question from Propaganda, which is Quinn. And he's asking, has anyone, and I guess this is for the panel and you, Kendra, question, has anyone thought about disrupting a DNC event like Black Lives Matter?
So something fun with that, if I can steal this one. I think the date's October 15th and 16th here in Ohio in a city called Westerville. The DNC are having their next round of debates. So that's very, very close to Taylor and I. It's literally like if you draw lines from us that meet up, that's where Westerville is. So it's something that is probably going to be something that I try to work with other groups here in Ohio to get people to specifically outside. But that's also coming on the heels of that, basically the week of activism from August 4th to August 11th for Julian. So that may be something that's just a very natural follow-up to that too. So trying to get people in their cities at the same time that the DNC events are going on may be something that's worth doing too. Like get people to our local newspapers to rally there to try to make a scene. Do we know other DNC events? Like, do candidates have like full event schedules, or they're still only putting out like 1 or 2 events at a time right now?
I'm not totally sure about that, but I do think that, anybody, if you are interested, I encourage you guys to, if a candidate is going to be visiting your town or a town nearby and you can go there, you should go, and you should have signs that say, free Julian Assange, free Chelsea Manning. And if you have a chance, you should ask the candidates for their stance on Assange, because they're not going to be asked that in the debates. They're not going to be asked that by people in the mainstream media. So I think it's important to kind of be aware of that. And maybe we'll start to post, I don't know if we will or not. If we think it's appropriate, we could maybe post where, major DNC events will be held. Not that everybody else wouldn't know about that ahead of time.
I would encourage disruption, but I would make it either all inclusive with as many different whistleblowers names on it as you possibly could. Or I would make it incredibly specific, like interrupting a Bernie Sanders town hall where he let Black Lives Matter activists take the microphone and they got to speak to an audience that they would not have normally had access to. And
What
I think,
city was that in?
pardon?
What city was that in?
Oh man, I can't remember. I occasionally smoke the pot. Uh, I don't, but back to my original point. I'm 100% for disrupting like individual candidate forums or
Karen said Seattle
okay.
in the chat.
Rad. Let's go with Seattle. And you can make it all about why Bernie Sanders, why won't he say Julian Assange's name out loud? Why won't anyone on your team say Julian Assange's name out loud? You know, if you go to Elizabeth Warren and interrupt her town hall, you're probably going to get tackled like before you get to the stage. But try, you know, 40 bucks in your pocket for commissary and your ID, and that's what you need when you go and do this. And that's it. That's the only things you have in your pockets when you do that. 40 bucks and an ID. Nothing else. Do you understand me? Nothing else.
So I really like the way that Code Pink does things, and I think her name's Maria Benjamin. She's one of the people that actually inspired me to get like
Medea
Benjamin.
Yeah.
She's one of the people that inspired me to get back in because I saw this little like 4 foot nothing, like 95 pound soaking wet woman getting dragged off stage screaming like the most true facts you could ever hear. And there was a stream, I think Jamal Thomas did it, where he interviewed her, where she said like or interviewed someone involved in Code Pink, and they said like we can't keep doing this the way that we're doing this. Like there's not enough people acting. So I think right now is such a pivotal time that any moment, like the gears could just shift in one direction or the other. So being that potential catalyst to create that change in the right direction is so important for people to do right now. So I think even if you're just going out by yourself, like Kendra did at that first event, and passing out flyers and making a social media account to be your town's protest, like that's so important. So I want to give a big thank you to Kendra for actually doing that and setting that up, because that's so huge.
Oh, well, but remember, I did end up having like 5 people, so it was great. Didn't have to be by myself, but who is the lady from Winnipeg? She is awesome. I would love seeing her. She goes to all kinds of events, has her sign out.
It's Shauna.
Yes.
Shauna, yeah.
Oh, okay.
She does awesome work. And yeah, a lot of times it's just her, but she's had really amazing people talk to her, and she's got an awesome sign, and she's got her WikiLeaks shirt, and she rocks it.
She does. And it is true, courage it's contagious, and I love seeing, who was the name of the lady you were just talking about? Medea, what is it?
Medea Benjamin. Medea Benjamin.
Yes, she is awesome. I have gotten so much inspiration from her. I mean, she is so brave, and really people are sleeping, so we need some stuff like that to Kate, wake up.
I was really hoping that when Jimmy Dore was at the DNC event, because he got to be in one of the debates, I was so hoping he would just stand up and yell some fucking great line from the audience, but he didn't. So that kind of crushed my dreams there. But
we have a question from Charles. Hi, Charles. He is asking, okay, he said, Steve's suggestion of interrupting candidate town halls sounds intriguing. I love it. How can we bring this about? And are there other alternatives? So Steve, I guess that's where you go.
There are other alternatives, but I mean, roll tape on Black Lives Matter interrupting Bernie Sanders' speech. They got up and walked up and basically grabbed the microphone from him and started talking. I mean, that's essentially how you do it. The earlier out, the better, because the further along we are in the primaries, the more likely it is that the top tier candidates have secret security hovering, um, because that's a thing that takes place on the campaign trail, but also increased police presence goes up the further along into the primary that you get. So if you can't physically walk up onto the stage, um, then get as close as you possibly can with 3, 4, 5 of you and shout your damn fool heads off. Um,
So we had a question come through in the chat, and it's, what do the panelists think are the best tactics to ensure Senator Sanders is forced to clearly address the Assange issue? Do you think this is cruel? What role could activists and indie journalists play? And that's from Charles. I think the
He
only way
didn't
that
say
we
cruel. He said crucial because I
crucial.
saw
I'm
that. I
sorry.
was like, wait a
I'm
minute.
super fucking
little column A,
dyslexic.
little column B.
I'm,
Okay.
I'm sorry, but so that's a totally different answer. So the answer to that is yes, I do think it is crucial, and I think activists and indie journalists are the only way to pressure them to do this. Basically, Tulsi Gabbard's out of the race at this point for all intents and purposes. So Bernie Sanders is the only person that would actually speak on or is assumed to be in support of Julian, and he doesn't even come out in favor of him at all, period. Like, never said his name. So I think going to these events, and not just his town halls, but everyone's town halls, and standing up on stage and asking those questions, because I think it's Dak Rouleau, I believe, is the guy who's been going around asking everybody.
Yeah,
Yes,
he's
it's
actually in the
Dak.
chat right now, and I wanted to give a shout out to him because he has been going around and asking candidates and filming them, and that's how we have the footage of Andrew Yang, basically saying he thinks Assange needs to stand trial. So kudos to Dak for doing that, and I think more people need to definitely hold candidates accountable, and we definitely need to get Bernie Sanders to say Julian Assange's name. I think we've kind of had some guests on the show. Kind of the opinion is he's trying to play it safe right now, but I think it is something really important, and we have to keep putting that pressure on him as well as the other candidates to address this, because
I hear the same lame ass excuse for Bernie Sanders from every single person in left media, and it's, but if he says something, the mainstream media might pick on him.
right.
Like, impossibly more than they already are. You know what, dude? Like, if you can't bring anyone on your team, including Bree Gray and David Sirota, who have spoken about Julian Assange in the past, it gives a great picture of what he might let slide as president. Or as Andrew puts it, like, are you willing to trade, Julian Assange's life and the veneer of free press for Medicare for all? Are you willing to trade it for college free tuition? Do we need an independent media if we have a jobs program in green capitalism?
Well, and if he
And
won't stand up and say Julian Assange's name, is he going to stand up to the DNC when he gets screwed over again? Is he going to stand up to anybody on the world stage? Like, he needs to prove himself. And I think a lot of people were upset he didn't stand up to the DNC in 2016. And clearly kissing the ring and promoting Hillary didn't do him any favors. They're still attacking him now. And yeah, I think like Steve said, a lot of people are making excuses right now for him.
What did they call the Washington Post was like Sanders's, I think it was his Green New Deal is just like Trump's wall but worse, is how they phrased their headline. There's headline, I saw one earlier today from the Washington Post online that said democratic socialists are selling something that America doesn't want anymore. And then the subtext was, does America really need any more democracy? Like, more democracy, more government. And that's how the Washington Post was phrasing it. And the way that they've shaped the narrative, and I'm not a Bernie Sanders supporter or an advocate. I'm not telling anyone who to vote for or anything like that. We've made it clear on this show, we're not here for candidates. We're not here to be a commercial for your candidate. We're here for Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, whistleblowers globally, and to stand for a free press and with them, and to act on behalf of them as they are locked up.
Yeah, you're right, Steve. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but exactly. We have no ties to any candidate, and we're going to hold everybody accountable, especially on this issue. I'm sorry to cut you off. You can go ahead.
No, it's okay. But the amount of outright slander or libel or whatever it is when it's in print, it's both, because there's people like Zerlina Maxwell who get paid to do this. The amount of smearing that Bernie Sanders has gone through, and yet he still comes out and says, oh, well, Russia, or still comes out and calls Nicolas Maduro a tyrant. And that's not the kind of socialism that we want here. We want, we're going to look, it's white socialism. That's what we're talking about. It's not brown socialism. That's, and there's a clear distinction. And it is what he's done, the hoops that he's jumped through, the support that he threw Hillary Clinton, going to like over 30 events and crisscrossing the country on her behalf after she robbed him in broad daylight, and we all fucking saw it. In spite of all of that, he still tries this Russia garbage, or never saying Julian Assange's name out loud, never saying Chelsea Manning's name out loud. Tulsi Gabbard was about the only person who made a point to do that. And as Andrew said, that it doesn't look like she's got a realistic way forward, although I hope she stays in just to spite people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think with her not being on the debate stage, it's definitely not something that's helping. That debate is a whole nother issue to talk about. But I do want to get to this very important question that was in the chat, and that is, what is the best way and most effective way to phrase your question if you may only get 1 minute in with a candidate at a meet and greet? And they're referring to asking the candidate what they would do about Julian Assange. I'm going to hand that to Kendra, but first I want to make note that in regards to that question, you need to make sure that you preface his name with award-winning journalist every single time, because Christine Assange put out on Twitter and said to all of the supporters, every time you mention his name, you need to mention that he's a journalist and that he's an award-winning journalist. And she mentioned other things as well, but those two stand out to me. So if you do pose the question, always preface it, journalist Julian Assange, because a lot of people in the media who do not support him do not consider him a journalist. He is a journalist. Again, the US government doesn't even make that distinction, but it's important to use that descriptive term before you mention his name. So Kendra, what's your advice on how to address the candidates then?
I mean, I think one of the ways to address it would just be, what do you have to say about the largest case since the Pentagon Papers in U.S. history against free press in America? What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the U.S. extraditing a foreign journalist? I think I agree with you that it's really important to make sure you always refer correctly to Julian Assange as a journalist. But I think even with that, what do you have to say against, just flat out, what do you have to say against the U.S. indictment against Julian Assange and a free press? I mean, just let's get a statement. Let's have people talking about it even. It's just this just complete hush, I think, it's just awful. But that's what I would do, or just whatever comes out in the situation.
Right.
But I think that's important, because this case, I mean, it's huge. It's the free press. And to what Steve was saying about, people like thinking about making trades, this is the trade. There's no trade here. There's no trade. Once you can't talk about things, and we can see what's happened with the mainstream media. don't give this information. So now you want to get rid of our possibility to have any information through independent press, want to call WikiLeaks a terrorist organization. All of these things it's just so ridiculous. There go all the other issues. And I think that's part of why I'm so active about it, is I'm like, this is the last straw here. They can't be successful with this.
So
that was a long way.
You cut out for a second. No, you cut out for a second. So in the chat, Miss Joss brought up the fact that we need to think of more actions to address his treatment in Belmarsh prison. Christy, you brought up the point that many people were also asking about his not receiving letters. I know you sent us a link. Do you want to maybe clear that up for some people that are viewing?
I'm gonna post the link in here in the chat again. So yeah, the Defend WikiLeaks article that came out, I think it came out yesterday or today. So basically about his prison sentence ending. If you scroll further down, there is a paragraph that reads, Julian Assange is currently being held in solitary confinement. He remains in the health ward and is only transported in and out of his cell under so-called controlled moves, meaning the prison is locked down and hallways are cleared. Furthermore, the prison hasn't delivered mail to him for over a month, and Julian is unable to call his parents or his U.S. lawyer. Continuing to imprison him beyond his sentence furthers this inhumane treatment and should be condemned. And then it goes on to talk about Chris Williamson, who's an MP, about him tweeting in support for Julian. And then it goes on to talk about the next few court dates. So this is a pretty serious article that WikiLeaks has put out, the defendwikileaks.org website, saying now that he's not receiving mail. We talked a little bit earlier about how he has not been able to call his parents. They have been approved, but he has not been able to talk to them. And then, of course, the issue of him not getting to speak with his lawyers. His UK lawyers have mentioned they can't even bring documents into him, that they have to post them, and he has to receive them through the mail system. So if he's not receiving his mail, he's also not receiving any sort of court documents. And I believe the court hearing this week, he was a little taken off guard, as this article mentions, that the bail issue was brought up, and that this judge was not originally supposed to be talking about the bail issue. I believe this article is John Shipton is interviewed in.
Are we doing this whole thing right now?
Sure. I mean, it's so just kind of addressing what they're talking about in the chat is from this article specifically. So we can dive into this right now, or we can come back to it.
Okay, so I guess we don't. Steve is like, what's going on here? So we should probably get to that. I did kind of step out for a second. So whoever wants to provide some sort of background information or intro into what happened, I guess I could start. So basically there was a hearing, and according to the WikiLeaks website, this was sort of like a technical hearing, I guess.
It was supposed to be a technical hearing, but the bail issue was brought up separately by the judge from this article, what it's saying.
And I think also, too, they made mention of the fact that Julian's attorneys never filed an application for his bail. I think, well, first of all, they didn't even realize that there was going to be that they had the opportunity to do so, I believe. But I think that was also probably a tactic to throw him off and to make him distrust his attorney, possibly. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't mean to get into conspiracy theories, but I think that was probably, there was a method to that. What is everybody's thoughts on that?
So the court system, especially when the court system is working on behalf of MI5 and working on behalf of the CIA, will do whatever they can to screw over the person that's going to stand in front of them. I mean, this has happened throughout Julian Assange's history. The first time that he was in jail, they put metal shavings in his food to wreck his teeth. And also give him intense, mouth pain and headaches and everything that goes along with that. This is a guy who's been systemically tortured for years and years and years in isolation, now in further isolation, and put to ill health as a result of it. It wouldn't surprise me in the least to find out along the way that this was a procedural stunt to aggravate or further cause a strain between him and his lawyers. And still at this point, he's not allowed to talk to his American lawyers. What really surprises me about it is the ancillary nature of the bail discussion, because all they were supposed to be there for was to say, okay, time served, right?
Right, and
Wasn't
they
that the
chose.
original?
I believe
Yeah.
so, yeah. And then they also chose not to release him. He will remain in prison, and the judge is citing his being a flight risk for this, which shows that she has no respect for the asylum process and the asylum, system, because he was seeking asylum at that time, and that's why he did not attend that, or he, violated his bail. So
the
it
UK
shows.
court, yeah, the UK court has repeatedly refused to acknowledge the asylum and the reasons he applied and sought asylum. Even with these indictments now out from the US, they still just refuse to acknowledge that asylum. Yeah, and like Taylor was saying, this is a big part of why they're refusing to release him early, or I guess when he should appropriately be released later this week, actually now. So, I mean, we're kind of at this impasse here that the UK just refuses to acknowledge any part of the asylum.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
this is a different judge too, so.
I believe that this judge, and again, I don't want to provide misinformation, but I believe that this judge also has a history of being not the most ethical. And I'm not sure if it's this one or the one prior that was also implicated in some of the WikiLeaks publications.
That was the one prior.
The one prior, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure much on history of this newest one. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some ethical issues with this one as well.
Absolutely. But there is a complete lack of respect for this asylum process. All of these countries that are involved in this, the United States, Sweden, Ecuador, there's just a lack of respect for international law. It's
Well,
so
you gotta look at the countries involved, though. I mean, Sweden and the US have a deal where they can pass along criminals through either one's judicial system. Like, that's a thing that exists. They have this partnership for that. The reason, and the phrase absconding, I think, is what they used for Julian Assange. Absconding is not walking to an embassy and seeking asylum, because the Swedish government wouldn't guarantee that they weren't pressing these charges and trying to get you into court as an excuse to hand you over to the United States government.
Didn't Sweden bring more charges up, or aren't they trying to? I thought I saw that pop up as a headline.
So what they said they were going to reopen.
Wait, there were never charges. There were never charges. Never charges.
Yeah.
Reopening the case. I apologize.
Reopening an investigation, and there was an additional witness that had popped up out of the woodwork after however many years that they said they wanted to interview. But
and there was this kind of back and forth on, they wanted him to be extradited to Sweden to interview. That was overturned, and then the main attorney said, well, I'll think about it, we're still investigating, I don't know if I'm going to go to London to question him again. So that got really wishy-washy real fast.
I thought he was formally questioned in the embassy at one time.
He was originally.
Okay.
2016 or 17. 16, I think, and then it was officially closed in 17. I could be
Right.
off.
They
there.
found that they found that there wasn't sufficient evidence to continue on with the investigation, and they dropped the case.
Yep.
And then, of course,
Everything was
now when it's
closed.
convenient, they decide to look into it.
Yeah, right after the arrest, then they're suddenly deciding, oh, we're going to reopen this, and we're going to maybe try to get him brought here to talk to him again. But we don't know if we want to go to London. When they did interview him in London, his lawyers I believe, had to file to get it, basically the ball rolling for the head attorney at that time. Her name is escaping me. Sorry. To go to London and interview him, and that took, I think, over the course of a year after they filed. She finally came to London, finally did the interview, and then another 6 months or so later, finally closed the case. So it is definitely seemed that through the course of this whole Swedish case, there's been a lot of dragging on and back and forth.
Absolutely.
No
And I
charges
think
ever filed.
absolutely. I think as this case continues to intensify as well, and as the pressure is being put on Assange and everybody involved in this case, I think it really causes people to become even more outraged, and people who maybe weren't paying attention to this particular case in general are really paying attention and doing something about it. And I think you kind of alluded to that earlier, Kendra. So can you like pinpoint maybe one moment where you just, throughout this case, where it really inspired you to kind of go ahead and really start to assemble and organize and do something to initiate some change?
Well, I think it's just, well, one thing, I mean, for me, it was my own personal decision, as well, where it was just, it's just time to do something about it. You can't, everybody has their own part, and inaction is an action, and so that was, it was just my own, a little bit of your own soul searching needs to happen in order to just kind of be like, okay, well, now it's time to put up or shut up. And I think, specifically with the Swedish case, it's such a lie, because they make something so sensational. Oh, he's a rapist or whatever. And, never accused by the women of that, which is huge. And then they want to pretend how much, that they need justice for these women, but yet, can't interview Assange in the embassy for years and years and years, which everybody knows that is a terrible thing for victims. So it's like feigning all of these lies, when really that's the thing, is that you just got to scratch the surface and they kind of all come undone, because it doesn't make any sense. So them bringing it up again now, it's ludicrous. But just that word, people just associating him with that word repeatedly, and people start to accept it as true when it's not. So
that's an important point that you bring up too, because it really was the police officers who were really behind this rape accusation. It wasn't the two Swedish women who were necessarily accusing him of this. The police had a huge impact on that. And
Right,
I know that his mom wanted people to really make sure that people are aware of that fact. Go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, the original accusation was to get him to take an STD test or HIV test. And then they kind of got passed from prosecutor to prosecutor. And then one of the women was asked to sign something accusing him of rape, and she refused. Another one actually tweeted kind of after the fact saying that she was not raped. So yeah, when people talk about we need to believe all women and we need to believe these two women, well, in fact, they have never come out publicly saying that they were raped. So I think that's a very, very important point to clarify when people are using the
right.
rape
I totally
smear.
agree, and we talked about this before too. But the thing is that I think that there was probably some jealousy too. One of these women was associated with him and felt it was going a certain way, and then she finds out that he was involved with yet another woman. This is something that happens all the time, but I think that there was also a jealousy component as well. And again, you're right, Christy, we can't be using something so serious to try to smear somebody and destroy them. But again, this is a tactic that's used often, and we've seen it throughout history in many cases, unfortunately, and people buy into it, and the mainstream media is complicit in it. And I like to think too that if you are an average person and you can kind of do something about it and stand up and be active and bring awareness to this corruption, you are obligated to do so. And you are sort of complicit if you choose just to sit back and not do anything about this, because again, it's going to take people on the ground, the average person, to really make a difference in this case, in cases like it.
And it's two things too. So you have what I fucking hate the term, but it's literally the weaponization of rape. It demeans people that have actually gone through those situations, and it's literally just one of the most bullshit things you can do is cry rape in a situation where it hasn't happened, because it just delegitimizes every other person when they say that that happened or it has really happened to someone. But the same mainstream media that's attacking him for those charges are also just completely ignoring everyone affiliated with Jeffrey Epstein. So it really just shows how it's a very, very specific outrage with certain people and certain issues just to try to spin public perception certain ways. So it's definitely by design. Um, and with
And
them trying to just
frequently, I'm sorry to interrupt, this frequently happens to whistleblowers. Frequently. And it seems to be the default smear. Susie Dawson has written about this. It is one of those things, because it's such a horrific act. It's one of those things that people just knee jerk have an emotional, visceral reaction to. And if you can successfully paint Julian Assange in that light, you have successfully influenced a tremendous amount of people. And undoing that narrative, if they were to come out today and say, yeah, whoops, we got that wrong, they would put it on page 16 in a paragraph that big, and nobody would fucking see it. And then a few independent media channels would cover it, and it might get onto Fox News because Tucker Carlson will occasionally say some things, and then it's further discredited by centrist media outlets and all of the the Facebook brigade that really thinks that Joy Reid is the bee's knees and Rachel Maddow is super awesome. And that permeates, and untangling that web of shit is something that we have to do in real time every day.
Yeah, it's important to do that. But the thing is too, you're right, it would be on like page 16 of whatever mainstream outlet. But also there's these mainstream media outlets, not to make an excuse for them, but they're very financially motivated, of course, and competition motivated. And that's because of the flaws of the system in which we live. So when a story, I think, is kind of overexhausted, or there's no like sort of excitement factor to it any longer, there's no reason to continue pushing it in talking about it and bringing it to light. And I think it's important that independent media doesn't do that too. We can't talk about Assange once and then never bring it up again, because it's not because he was arrested X amount of months ago, and it's not like this hot new story. We have to get away from that, and we have to be thinking about things that people should be aware of and the importance of them versus this competition factor. But the mainstream media does that quite a bit. But I think that's why independent media kind of has an advantage, where there's an opportunity where you're not confined to have to do those sorts of things, if that makes sense.
So I think this is a good time to try to mention that there is a lot of self-censorship inside of the independent media circles, even within people that support Julian Assange and the causes of free speech. And a lot of times it has to do with fears of monetization and demonetization and getting channels removed or banned or suspended. And a lot of times all it takes is pressure from people. Like when um, Pamela Anderson stepped out and came out on The View and basically literally just got like spit at by these women for 10 minutes. That created a space for people to talk about Julian Assange again within independent media. And I really hope that that space stays open. because a lot of the content creators that are really influential aren't silent on Julian, but don't necessarily talk about him or bring him up outside of that news cycle. So it takes people like us, like not just the people on this stream, but the people that are actually watching and listening, to ask them questions and to send them emails like, hey, can you cover this article about Julian or this article about Chelsea or Jeremy? Because that's the only way that they hear about it too, because of the censorship, unless they go out and directly seek it out. So I think sharing articles with independent media is something that's super crucial, because if we don't, no one else will.
That's an excellent point. And you're spot on about the self-censorship. We know that there are people that will go out of their way to mention Julian Assange, but won't put his name anywhere near the title of the video. The shows become, you know, about generating revenue and sustaining that revenue. And that means you are making decisions with your wallet at the end of your, you know, whatever your pre-production is. Am I, you know, how much is it going to cost me if I say this? And that to me is I guess a trap in the way that we've set up monetized thought, and the way that we've the platforms that we have to go through, and the fact that we all do get censored when we talk about this stuff. We all do significantly, in one way, shape, or form, pay for speaking truth to power, for especially when it comes to Julian Assange, especially when it comes to Chelsea Manning. So it's understandable in a sick, sad sense in a way, but at least my approach on my show is, fuck it. And I'm going to talk about the things I'm going to talk about because everybody is self-censoring about it. And it costs me, for like every 15 to like 30, 40 people that subscribe, 1 or 2 gets counted. My views get suppressed. There's no share suggestion, you know, stuff like that. And I'm comfortable with that because I'm doing the most honest show that I can, and I'm not censoring myself, and I'm happy with that.
And
I
you
know.
cover.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I know for me, when all of this happened, when Julian Assange was arrested, I was really surprised to see certain people, you know, that I thought were kind of outside of the mainstream media not speak out about this, and you know, through replies and things like that, just still for them to be silent. And to me, it is such a clear case for free press around the world. And I mean, just even humanity with what's happened to Julian Assange is just, I mean, it's embarrassing for everybody alive right now, what's going on there, especially if you consider yourself a citizen of a free country. I mean, this is just stuff that should not be going on. And I really think I use it for me now. It's a litmus test. It's so cut and dry that it's just, if you're not speaking out about this, then something's wrong there. And the other thing too that I'll have to say is that if you are speaking out about it, and I don't agree with anything else that you might have to say politically, you know, that's somebody that I want to have a conversation with. You know, those, like, we're people who can talk about our differences and things like that. But to me, it's such a litmus test. And the self-censorship, it's really sad, because you know, it's wearing shackles and you don't have them on. You know, it's already, it's like we're not quite yet. It's just accepting that you're beaten down and kind of, you know, as a already a slave when you're not, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know. Do you guys know what I mean?
Absolutely. There's a comment in the chat that kind of goes along with what you're talking about. And the Jeff Thomas Black is saying civility is for chumps and rubes, which was one of Hunter S. Thompson's favorite words. And I'm for that. I am. Civility and tone policing is a tactic used by the ruling elite whenever they need to silence dissent, whenever they need to stamp down truth, because truth, especially truth about war crimes, about child sex trafficking, about the complete and utter corruption and rot at the heart of intelligence agencies and governments, is vulgar. And when you realize just how much these demons have got away with, you get a little upset. Or at least I do. I am, despite my mellow nature, I am sort of an animated individual. Uh, and I curse a lot. And that's when civility and tone policing come in, because there's no argument to what you're saying. There's no counter to it. You don't attack the credibility of an organization with 100% accuracy rating that has never had to issue a retracted statement, so you have to do anything else. And that's 100% what calls for civility, or here in the Democratic Party in the US, where they call for unity. Unity is code for bow your neck, peasant. We have plans.
Right. Now, somebody in the chat, this is from Quinn. He said, at Action for Assange, has anyone thought of an ALS challenge type of thing to help raise awareness, like the ice bucket challenge, but not lame? Kendra, I want to get your thoughts in on this, because I know you did say that you're in and had some thoughts in on that. So if you could weigh in.
No, I love that idea. Quinn, if you come up with something, I'll be the first person. Well, maybe the second person. You might be the first person, but I'm definitely in. We have to think of something, though.
Yeah, I want to hear some suggestions from the chat. Like, Quinn must have some ideas if he suggested it.
Yeah, definitely. Quinn, if you have suggestions, do let us know. And also, you guys tweet at us some of your ideas, because we love hearing like these ideas. Like, that's so interesting. I would never think, that we could look at something that was done, or at least this particular thing that was done in the past for something that's related to a medical health issue, and kind of use that strategy and apply it to this, because that was, extremely effective. I remember that. And so many people were involved in that, and it really just brought people, together. So I definitely think it's something that we could, kind of model after. But we do have a question. Okay, so Charles Clark said the ice bucket challenge for Assange would be either a 24-hour vow of silence or a 24-hour period locked in a room alone. Okay, so Quinn now is also saying, he said, I got nothing, but it should be easy to do and related to Julian Assange, for sure. So Quinn, if you do have ideas and you think of something, please let us know. And same for the rest of you guys watching, tweet at us, let us know your thoughts, because again, this whole vigil is really all about the activism too, and highlighting the certain actions that people are taking, and also helping people figure out creative ways to really bring awareness to this situation. Because again, we don't have a whole lot of time. That's not to scare anybody, but just to make people aware that this extradition hearing is approaching us, and we have to act. There was a question in the chat. Okay, this is from Charles again. And he is saying, are there any work stoppages like journalism strikes surrounding Assange? I would have to say no. I've never heard of any. I think if there were any, I think we would probably know about that, or maybe we wouldn't, because they would be reluctant to cover it. But I don't see any mainstream journalists or organized like journalistic organization that would even be willing to do this, unfortunately.
I would like to see work startages in support of Julian Assange at like every corner of media everywhere. If we could encourage work startages, I would be 100% for that. I would be. I think we should do that. Let's.
That would be fun. Putting out like literal work startage campaign to all these different mainstream, like to the people specifically, to like the faces and the personalities. Like I think that's a really cool idea. But as far as the challenge for Julian Assange, I was thinking maybe some kind of like 1A challenge where people literally just like put on a gag in support of Julian, not like a ball gag, but like the the gag he has in the pictures in support of Julian Assange. Like that might be something cool.
I just learned something about Andrew tonight.
All you had to do is ask.
All right, so it got pretty silent. So all right, I'm just gonna read comments. That's what we're gonna resort to now when it gets weird like this. So anyways, propaganda, Quinn, and I'm only kidding with you, Andrew. Quinn is saying, I made Julian Assange clothes and gave them to homeless peeps and people at the skate park. That's a really good idea. That's also that's helping two causes. It's bringing awareness to Julian Assange, of course, and then also helping people who are really in need. So I commend you for that. That's a great idea.
So
that is a great idea.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that's one of the things that we put, like when we send, anytime we get email addresses, we send out a welcome letter that has our mission statement, and that's one of the things that we're always encouraging people. Is it's like, I loved Susie Dawson's article about activism. She was saying like true activism is creative. It has different people doing different things, and I think that's so important. I think it's important for everybody to know that too. That it's like somebody else isn't going to do it. It's, your idea that you have in your head, you should do that. And then other people will start doing it. Like even Candles for Assange or the Belmarsh rally, now there are a lot of people coming in with solidarity for that. So anything that you do, other people are going to, like even these vigils, somebody had the idea for that and you guys are keeping them going. It's just great.
So someone in the chat, this is from RSK, said, I was thinking I will go to the climate strike event in my Free Assange shirt. That's a great idea. And I think that others in independent media have advocated for this type of activism as well, is where you attend an event that's sort of on an unrelated issue, be it climate change or LGBTQ rights, something like that. And then also like having a sign that's supporting that message, but then also maybe on the back of that, having a sign, or on the back of that sign, it's saying like Free Assange or a free press, or wearing a t-shirt. So kind of going to these different activism events and bringing the message to these events is really important. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. And make sure you guys take pictures of this and share it on social media, because that helps people see that other people are taking these actions, and it makes them more likely to follow your lead and do the same thing.
Yeah, I would grab like a 12-pack of buddies and Free Assange all of you. See if you can't get a banner printed up and carry that shit. Hold it up, make flags, be visible. Try to be more than one of you. Do it in a sort of decentralized way so that you can have multiple pockets of whatever your signage or your particular way of expression, whatever your manner of expression is. Make sure that there's more than one of you. Like get all up in that shit. Do that, like spread it around.
So Susie Dawson actually put out a video recently about, in her updates in the 1v5i, and in it she talked about how the fundamental pillars of what we're facing are the mainstream media, the military, police states, and governmental control. And all four of them are built on a foundation of pushing information away. And as long as they can maintain that secrecy and maintain keeping information out of the public eye, they can maintain power. because even if one of those specific things falls, they still have the ability to rely on the other three or even other two pillars. Like, for example, if the police were demilitarized in the United States, that wouldn't change anything with the mainstream media, wouldn't change anything with how our military acts or the way that we're actually governed. So the way to actually get in there and actually make change within the system is to inform the people around you of the actual things that WikiLeaks has released, like the Guantanamo Bay files that revealed, I believe it was close to 600 detainees that were tortured in there, and things, just actual specific pieces of information that can help people just put pieces together about.
I think that's such a huge point too, because that's the one thing is that anybody who is familiar with what was leaked, you know, is of the same opinion, which is to free Assange. You know, once you become familiar with that, which there's a huge effort to stop people from even reading what's already out there, which has been pretty successful. But I think once anybody's familiar with that information, then there really just aren't any questions there.
No, there's some bells that you just can't unring, and once you've read a series of drops, or even just like a few lines out of the Stratfor emails, or Andrew's favorite, the Gulf of Aden, um, you can't unring that. And I think the next step is the hardest step, which is doing something about it. So that's where having a couple of friends and doing decentralized activism really comes into play. And I really suggest that you start by going to, as Andrew and Taylor have, like a Jimmy Dore event. If you can't find one of those, go to somebody else's protest, go to a music festival while we still have some summer left. um, Go as Julian Assange for Halloween this year. Go as Chelsea Manning for Halloween this year. In my town, and I know that this is not how it is everywhere else, but this is how it is in Boulder Creek, California. Town shuts down and everybody trick or treats business to business, like in the street, out, adults, kids. It's a community event, and I think that would be a perfect place to have a giant Free Assange banner.
So I think something too, and this is kind of goes back to the bigger point of like all of the events that are going on and places that we need to get out to. If anyone listening would actually be interested in helping us compile lists of places like that to put shout outs to, please email us actionforassange@protonmail.com. Um, I'm always looking for back end help for things, and I know that a lot of us are always trying to get information together. So if you're interested in helping out, feel free to send us an email. What other news do we want to cover tonight?
So
I think we wanted to
wanted,
talk about Snowden. Sorry, Steve.
oh yeah, no,
Go
but
ahead.
I wanted to kind of go back and cap off the the recent hearing, and the after, like the reality and the fallout from that, and the fact that February 25th is the day of his extradition hearing. Um, we have until February 25th to prevent the extradition of Julian Assange, because if Julian Assange is extradited to the United States, he faces 18 mostly manufactured charges, one of them just for doing journalism. The Espionage Act charges, of course, compromise the entire media, like globally, independent journalists everywhere, because Julian Assange is not a citizen of the United States. He's a publisher of a website. And to set the precedent that you could sentence to death or try for, literally, because 175 years in prison is a death sentence, um, for publishing stuff you don't like. Verified, accurate, never retracted stuff you don't like is a very dangerous precedent to set. And that alone is something that ordinary people should be getting activated about. And that's why we do this. That's why Kendra does her thing. That's why we're all trying to encourage action out of you guys. It's, you know, action for Assange, not hang out and talk about Assange, although it helps with the action, I hope.
So Steve, I'm really glad that you did bring up the date coming up, because like I had mentioned before too, it is in February of 2020. I believe it's the 25th. It is a 5-day hearing. It's approaching pretty soon. And I think that it's fair to say that we cannot trust the mainstream media to really be covering this appropriately and accurately. So, you know, it's not too far fetched that maybe, you know, it would be a good thing to be there and, you know, potentially be able to relay the information to you guys and to others about what exactly is going on. So maybe something we could all think about depending on what the panel thinks. So yeah, I think it would be interesting to sort of be there, because I think it's important that during this hearing, the correct information is being put forth to the public. And sure, it's a small effort that, you know, we be the people to do that. But I think besides like RT, I can't think of any other organization that would probably report accurately on this. What are your thoughts, Christy?
Yeah, that would be very interesting to have us there, perhaps doing a live stream and giving the information day to day on how the hearing is going. I think you're right. I think it's going to be hard to come by factual information, and probably not many media outlets are going to carry it. They might maybe the first day, and then, you know, the last day, whatever the verdict is. But as we've seen before, and we've seen in the last almost 6 months, getting factual information on what is happening to Assange is unfortunately not easy to come by.
Did you guys see what Greek Emmy had put out with Wise Up to, you know, be calling the courts and demanding, hey, why can't I get an accurate, you know, this is an incredibly important case for the entire world. Why can't we get it? You know, that's something that everybody could do right now, you know, that's on the chat, or maybe not right now, but take a half an hour tomorrow and, you know, call the court and say, hey, why can't I get accurate information on here? What's the plan for the upcoming court cases? You know, what's going to happen? And I just think that pressure constantly, whether it'll help or not, we should still do it. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree. We should put pressure on them and make sure that we do get this accurate information. But it may also be interesting too to head there and maybe take this show to the road for a very, very important 5 days. That is an understatement, but very true. I mean, it would be important to be able to, you know, convey accurate info. Christy, go ahead.
I mean, those 5 days are really just a test of the human spirit. Like, that's what it comes down to. Like, who are we as a planet? Like, are we willing to sit by and watch war criminals and serial pedophiles rule the world with no one actually challenging them in an organized and systemic manner? So that's ultimately, at least in my opinion, what it comes down to.
Don't try and paint it with too broad a brush, Andrew. I mean, I speak of the veneer of free press that we have in this country, and that's true. But it even rattled the people in mainstream media. The charges that have been levied against Julian Assange here, it is the death of independent journalism. We're not going to be allowed to report on this stuff post Julian Assange's sentencing in the US. If and by allowed, I mean we would be shut down or subject to prosecution for talking about stuff the government doesn't like. I don't know. We go through documents here. I go through documents on my show.
And an interesting side note too, and this is like just completely out of left field related to government transparency. There was recently a bill passed, I can't remember the number, that allows for any government agency, Housing and Urban Development, Department of Education, what have you, to literally just create a black book. And this is in response to the $21 trillion being discovered from unaccountable adjustments, essentially, from the Pentagon. So there's a really, really big problem that independent media and different people aren't even going to be able to report on how our taxpayer dollars are being used going forward. And without having an actual free press to break that, it's done. Like that's pure fascism. Like nothing short of that.
Well, and you know what's interesting too, just from some of these different points and the ones that you had brought up that Susie mentioned about what we're up against. I mean, that's another thing for activism too. Is yes, it's free Assange, but even how do you get people to stop, or how do you get people to even think about it? And maybe that's some of the ways. Like just even stickers around that say, do you realize there is no free press, or February 25th. Free press might be lost, or do you know what I mean? Things like that, just to start getting people to think about these things, because really it's abnormal that people are not out. The people who are out on the streets, or the people who are trying to be active in their other ways by writing to their congressmen or doing whatever they're doing, that's the normal thing. It's really this other thing that's going on right now that's absolutely not normal.
Yeah,
and I
exactly.
think even without
it's really important to make sure that we're active and really making sure that we're bringing the message to people. So we did ask you guys in the chat about taking the show to London during the hearing, because we did want to know your thoughts on that, if you would be interested. And some of you guys are saying yes, that you would be interested, so that's definitely something that we could think about, that we could maybe arrange, because it would be important to be there to provide accurate information and really see what the entire field is really like. Because I think we mentioned it on a visual previously, that we could already kind of say exactly what the mainstream media is going to say about this case, and what they're going to say about Assange personally. So yeah, if you guys are interested in us, the four of us doing that, please let us know, because that's definitely something that we could arrange, and we have plenty of time to do that, because it is a few months away. As far as like participating in activism wise, it's not a whole lot of time, but arranging plans, it's definitely doable. So yeah, just let us know about your thoughts. And I'm sorry I cut you off, Kendra, if you want to finish up your statement. My apologies.
Oh, no, you're fine. I think I was pretty much done, but
So there's a question in the chat from Quinn, if this would be crowdfunded. Yeah, I think it would have to be. I know I don't have go to London, so I can cover this cash just lying around. If I did, I might even get a haircut. But that's not the case. I have 3 kids, and we live in late stage capitalism. It gets spendy. Jesus Christ, man, milk $6 a gallon here. Like that's some real shit. So yeah, I mean, it would absolutely, I'd have to be a crowdfunded event. But I think we have time, and I think with your help we can generate enough energy out of this and build an audience that that would be willing to participate in this experiment in getting some truth out on an otherwise largely ignored week. If they're not going to cover Roger Waters playing Wish You Were Here acoustic for the first time in like ever, then why would they turn a camera onto an extradition hearing until it was all said and done? Anyone? That's a legitimate question.
That's very true. Roger Waters did not get a lot of traction in the mainstream media with that impromptu concert. There was quite a crowd, because I think they maybe announced it less than a week before it happened, but they still got a really good crowd there. But the mainstream did not cover it so well.
And that's specifically intentional. Like if they covered it, they would have to start talking about all of the other issues on why Roger Waters supports Julian Assange and all this. So it's like it's just that same old radio silence on the issue, hoping that it goes away. And like I don't see how they get away with it so well. Like I understand that they control all of social media, but the way that they're able to just break information apart and make people horrified to even talk about things is incredible to me. Like the simple fact that they can have like for across the board politically, across the board professionally, like bringing up the name Julian Assange is literally like yelling the N word in some places. And to me, that's just absolutely insane that
It
like they're
really is. Oh, I was just going to say one thing that I thought was interesting is I was, when the torture, where the report came out, the UN report, saying that Julian Assange had been psychologically tortured, I looked that up, and I had found something like some CIA doc, something like that, just describing what exactly that is. And I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds a lot like the mainstream media and what they've been doing to everybody, just completely disassociation from reality and lies all the time. And
is this the quote from William Casey, the CIA director, and who said in 1981, "We'll know our disinformation campaign is complete when nothing the American public believes is real"?
You know what? I have not heard that quote, but that about sums it up.
Yeah, he said that in 81. Noam Chomsky wrote Manufacturing Consent in 89. We're 30 years removed from that. Consent was manufactured. If it wasn't 100% manufactured, by the time the ink was dry on the Patriot Act, it was. From that point on, manufactured. We live in manufactured confusion. And that's the function that mainstream media plays now. They manufacture confusion. We are told 8 billion different versions of the same story that get shouted at us from the far right to the middle. And I don't know about y'all, I'm over here on me and like Emma Goldman way down here in we're fine with being leftist, just not the authoritarian kind. It's the role of independent media to stop the damn self-censorship, to inform our audiences about history, and to constantly rewrite or combat the rewriting of real time, which is what we get from our mainstream media, is the rewriting of real time. And it is one of the most bizarre things to watch. But
and it's gotten so bad to the point now that it's even just going back and editing the things that they already reported correctly. Like with the whole Iran situation happening right now, the Houthis came out and said we did it. Like the Yemeni people said, no, we did this. Like we attacked that oil field because you've been sieging us for the last few years. And they're like, oh, it was Iran. Like these people said it, but it was these people. Like don't believe the people that have accurately attacked previous oil fields within the last 6 months and all this other stuff. So it's not even writing it as it's coming out. It's rewriting it once they fuck it up when they release the real story and then have to write over it again. So it's gotten to the point that they can't even have a false flag because everyone's sitting there waiting for the next one. So that's like the little bit of hope that I have is people are actually paying enough of an attention that even when they hear something now, they're like, oh no, that's just another false flag. Like that's a lie.
See, I like to think that it is like, I know that many people are in increasingly larger numbers going to like YouTube and independent media to get their information. However, I still think it's like still a very small group of people. Like that means like all of us, and like we're all in this like together, but we have to understand that there's a whole nother world out there of people that like are still watching the mainstream media and still getting their lies there. Like people who are even, you know, interested in becoming journalists are still very much consumed by the mainstream media. And I just want to make this point, even in like academic institutions, like independent media is never mentioned, it's never brought up, it's never talked about, because we know that they're all infiltrated and they're all pushing this for the same thing. So I see it as like a cyclical problem as well. And I don't even know how we could begin to really combat that. But kind of on a related topic, I know that we also wanted to talk about Edward Snowden, who's being sued by the United States right now for a book that he had published. They are saying that he violated an agreement that he had made when he joined the NSA, and that he should have provided them with the book prior to it being published so they can make seriously, so they can make redactions on the article, or not the article, on the book. Of course he's like not going to do that. But yeah, that's kind of a bold move that they're making now. And also they're not even threatening him with taking the book off the shelves. What they're threatening him with is to basically prevent him from making any money off of this book. So it shows that there's clearly a financial motive here, and that they're trying to harm him financially. This is something that they do all the time. We've seen it, of course, with Chelsea Manning, who is, I don't know how many her fines at this point, but last we talked about her case, it was like over 50,000. So this is a tactic that's used often.
Yeah, so they're accusing Snowden of violating an NDA that he would have signed joining the NSA or the US government. They're just kind of presupposing, because they didn't receive the book pre-publication to review and redact, that he is obviously violating something, and they're not trying to charge him with anything of violating, revealing secrets, revealing more leaked information. They're just being petty and going after any profit made from the book. So yeah, it's very personal, and it's very
petty. It's petty.
Very
oh
petty.
Man, if you want to see petty, piss off the NSA, piss off the CIA, because Bill Barr is CIA. Everybody that is watching this knows that, right? Like, Bill Barr was the guy who tried to prevent the Pentagon Papers from being published and being read into the congressional record by Mike Gravel. Bill Barr ran George H.W. Bush's Justice Department and ran cover for his fellow CIA comrades who orchestrated and carried out the Iran-Contra scandal. Donald Trump, trust fund kid. Have you met a trust fund kid who is a career trust fund kid like Donald Trump, who is not petty? I mean, there's this whole thing with Ed Snowden really does just seem to be I don't know, a blatant daylight robbery. I would like the 189 days in jail and $80,000 as of this morning for Chelsea Manning. That is disgusting.
It really is. So somebody, I want to address this. Someone, I believe it was Quinn, maybe, or no, it wasn't Quinn actually. They asked if we had a minds.com account. We do not, but thank you so much for the suggestion. We appreciate that. But yeah, it seems that they're kind of going after everybody that's associated with Assange, and this has been a common theme of, you know, our vigils and what we've been talking about. But I noticed that somebody on Twitter too said, you know, this completely backfired in a way, or it could potentially backfire, because this person said, I didn't even know that Edward Snowden came out with a book, but now I do know, and now I'm going to get it, which is probably why they wanted to go after his finances and the money that he would make off of this book, because of course it would bring greater attention to it. And I myself will admit too that I did not realize he had a book until this came out. I wish that I did know that.
Yeah,
I
it's
shouldn't
already a
have to, like,
number
hear
one
about these
best.
things.
It's already
Yeah.
the number one bestseller in books on Amazon.
Yeah, and
I,
you know what? They could have done that on purpose too, knowing that it would bring more attention and they can make money off of it. It's just so sick and twisted. It's so methodical. It's such a these people that are, you know, in power. I don't know if it attracts this type of personality or what it is, but we have a real problem, and it's very much deep rooted in our government system.
So I actually want to toss a question over here to Kendra. I was typing out in our chat here, but I'm just going to ask it. So to preface it a little bit, I have a friend who does a lot of activism. They travel all over the place. They do amazing work at places where you normally wouldn't think you would see a free Assange or a free speech activist. They're constantly harassed online, like to the point that they're thinking of giving up activism simply because of how much they're harassed online and just how much it affects and hurts them as a person. Um, what have you experienced as far as like online harassment or like weird, just kind of reoccurring themes and patterns of talking with people that are trying to discredit you and stuff like that?
So I would have to say that I have actually not experienced that. I have been so far, I guess, lucky that I haven't really had to deal with that too much. You know, I haven't had any serious bullying or anything like that happen. To be quite honest, I think it might be a little bit of a good sign because that'll mean that I'm being more effective. But I do think that's a really difficult thing for activists to deal with. Obviously, I think that's I'm glad that Susie Dawson had started this Five Eyes, because that's really for everybody who's involved in activism as well. And that's but I think that really saddens me to hear. I would, on a separate note, love to talk to this person to get some more ideas to do as well. But I think it's a very serious thing. That's awful to hear about. But if you could put me in touch, that would be great.
Absolutely. I'll reach out to them to see if they're okay with that, and I'll pass along their number to you.
Thank you.
So
people are, I do want to address this. People are asking about the wristbands, actually. So yeah, we have for a while been trying to figure out ways to mass distribute them and the money go to a cause that we support, which would be to Chelsea Manning's legal fund and Julian Assange's legal fund. But we're having some trouble doing that, and it's very difficult to do. Quinn is asking about the cost for a bag. It all depends on how many you order. I have directions on how to do so. I wish I say this all the time, I wish I had a much more sophisticated way of showing you guys how to get these yellow wristbands, but you have to just go through this like basic process to get them, and I just lay it all out step by step, exactly the format and how I kind of design them myself. So that is on my Twitter, but I will retweet that and I'll tweet it out on ActionForAssange later today too. They're not too expensive. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth it because they definitely grab people's attention, and it definitely gives people a sense of unity. And I think people tend to want to feel like they're belonging to a group, I guess. And of course, we are also emphasizing decentralized activism, but this is still a great way to bring attention and awareness if you're wearing something that people can see.
So I kind of want to circle it back around though to Julian Assange's recent hearing, because Craig Murray wrote an article that perfectly encapsulates the situation that we're looking at here right now, and that is Julian Assange is a political prisoner. There is zero argument around that. He is being held for no other reason than he's awaiting an extradition hearing. He should have been released, or should be released, Monday morning UK time. There's no crime that he committed in London. Like, the bail jumping thing is ridiculous and spurious to begin with, but that being done and over with on the 22nd should be a release for him. Now, because of the way that he's being remanded, he's a political prisoner. That's something that we should be screaming about every day. I know I did a video about it on my show on Monday, and I went and talked to Jason Burmis about it, who was on the vigil. Was that last week? I feel like it was last week.
Yes, the 11th.
Yeah. I went and talked to him about it on his show over the weekend. But there is scant information about this in quote unquote independent or left media. Like, this is something that people you would think would be screaming about. And the fact that it's not being mentioned, like, pretty much every time somebody goes live, hey, I'm so and so, you're welcome to the show, Julian Assange is a political prisoner, it terrifies me.
I actually sent an email out the day Julian Assange was taken out of the embassy and taken to Belmarsh prison with a media strategy akin to what was used in the media during the Vietnam War, and circulated that through as many different independent media outlets that I had emails for, and no one did it. No one picked it up.
Wait, nobody did it.
Nobody brought
Nobody
up
did
a
it.
counter. Right,
Okay.
nobody did it. No one opened their show and said Julian Assange has been in prison this many days. No one has done that. No one has put up a counter saying this is welcome to blah 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 show. This is day 4,100 and blah 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 of Julian Assange's detainment. I think it's close to 3,000 now, but
Over 3,000.
no one's done that. Yeah. And it's just crazy that independent media isn't taking this as a literal act of war against them.
I think, and Steve has made this point before, when you're talking to somebody who's left leaning and you point out that by not supporting Assange, you are essentially supporting Trump and his DOJ. Now that we've kind of moved past the bail jumping, now that there still are no Swedish charges, that is pretty much dead in the water. Now we are coming to a point where we can say this is just about Trump's DOJ, and the left should be rallying around this. They should be up in arms about this, but they're not.
Right. That's a good point you bring up, because I was actually talking to Graham about this the other day on his show, and many of these establishment Democratic candidates, what they do is they never say Julian Assange's name whenever they talk about his charges. Instead, what they do is that they mention, now they're starting to mention, okay, we're trying to distance ourselves from Trump and we disagree with his DOJ's, decision on this case, but they essentially still are supporting what his DOJ is doing. They can't have it both ways. So it's important. They're trying to insert politics into this issue, and it's not working out for them well at all.
If WikiLeaks helped Trump and Russia get Trump elected, why the star-spangled fuck is Trump's Department of Justice going after him? Why? The disconnect, the intentional disconnect that people put themselves through in order to smear Julian Assange, while tacitly defending the person that they're blaming Julian Assange for getting elected.
Exactly. And the only people that have addressed that conundrum are the QAnon people, because they think Trump is going to keep Julian safe and bring him to America and expose lies. So yeah, you have this huge dissonance of, why are they protecting Trump in this situation? Why this is a perfect opportunity to go after Trump and we're not doing it? What is the left? I don't know. I don't know how much.
And that's about the only thing that you can barely give Bernie Sanders credit for in his milquetoast 44-day late statement about Julian Assange, was that he specifically went after the Trump administration for going after publishers. And I mean, great, but that's a narrative that can work in like centrist kind of America. It is. And I think that that needs to be driven home 100% with those people, is that, you know, bad orange man is doing this to the person who prints the truth because nobody else is doing it.
Yeah, I think part of it too with many of the establishment candidates is the fact that they still think that there was Russian influence in our election, and they think that Julian Assange is a puppet of the Russian government. Many of them have said that. I think that's still a sentiment that they still believe, or maybe they don't believe it and they just say that. But I think that they probably do believe that. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, it's something that doesn't make sense. It's something that actually, if you look at it through a different perspective, it unites the establishment. Um, you know, Democrats, and I guess if you really do, you know, support Trump, you would, you know, support what his DOJ is doing, despite the fact that he campaigned on the fact that he loved WikiLeaks, and now he knows nothing about WikiLeaks, which is
Well, and the
nonsense.
diehard Trumpsters are more often than not the people who complain about my free speech is being taken away. We don't have we don't have a free press in this country. We're, you know, and I understand that that's a bias because you want a bigger bubble than the one that you have, but or you want your bubble to be the only bubble. But if you're going to bitch about free speech, if you're going to bitch that your First and Second Amendment rights are under attack, there's a perfect example of someone that you can stand up for right now. Right.
Yeah,
And
and
Someone in the
somebody in
chat
the
is
chat.
even saying,
Oh, yeah,
I
Christy,
think we're
go
both
ahead.
trying to do this.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, someone in the chat typed, when Julian Assange was pulled out of the embassy, he said a few things, and one of them was the UK must resist this attempt by the Trump administration. He actually said that, and that's often ignored.
Of course it is, because there was one network that covered it entirely that was roughly out of Russia, and that was it. There was no one else there from media to write down those words.
Right, it was Rupley, which is RT, a branch of RT, and yes, it is, you know, was Russia Today. And then again, this fuels their narrative too, though. Oh, you know, the Russians are behind this, which is insane. But anyways, that's besides the point. Yeah,
and
I mean,
if
that quote is
CNN
something we
can
need
get
to
a
remember.
I was going to say, if CNN can get a reporter out in the front of someone's house when the FBI goes to raid them, they can get a reporter out in front of the Ecuadorian embassy when Julian Assange gets taken out. So it was a very intentional and deliberate move to try to not have to cover that and not get that on video, because it just shows, like, literally just the depravity that he'd been in. Like, they even deprived him of being able to shave his own face in preparation for this. Like, it's the meticulousness and the plotting and planning and everything behind the scenes to literally traffic this man for $4 billion, if not more, a couple city blocks from the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison. Like, the amount of money and time and energy and planning that had to go into that execution just shows how afraid they are of this one man that they've kept silent for 9 years now.
And that's a good point. And there's a great clip that Julian talks about how much money the UK has spent monitoring, setting up cameras, having police officers drop by and you know, rotate around the embassy since he's been there. Seems like an awful lot. I mean, we're talking millions of pounds that they're just for somebody on a bail charge. That doesn't quite add up.
Yeah, exactly. There's
For
so much money that
surveillance.
has been put into this. Somebody in the chat made a point. It was Robin. She said, yeah, they had to pay RT for that footage. They did. Or I don't know if they had to pay, or they had to get permission for it at least. Maybe they did have to pay for it.
But one thing too, especially with the recent actions about Jeremy Hunt and things like that, they don't have a real case against Julian Assange, and that's kind of what all their moves in the background is showing.
Is it Jeremy Hunt or Hammond?
Jeremy, I'm sorry, Jeremy Hammond.
Okay,
I get his
Jeremy
name messed up
Hunt's
all the time. Yeah,
okay.
no, I'm sorry. Jeremy Hammond, because he had nothing to do with those original charges. He had nothing to do with the Iraq war diaries, the Afghanistan war logs, the Guantanamo Bay files, and Cablegate. He was part of the Stratford emails and the global intelligence files. So for them to have to pull him into the Eastern District of Virginia after already having been on trial and being in prison, it means that they're desperate. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize, that that I don't really see anyone who talks about Jeremy brings up too much.
When do they go after Barrett Brown?
It's just a matter of time until they get everyone around that situation into that one prison, and then they have everyone who's ever gotten anything to WikiLeaks together in one room, essentially.
I want to address something in the chat. This is from Soraya. They're asking, has libertarian media picked up on Assange's case? They would be considered right, but anti-big government. They seem unhappy with Trump on Assange and the HARPA proposal. So we actually had the libertarian presidential candidate on our vigils, Adam Kokesh, and he is one of 3 candidates who strongly opposes the Trump administration's decision to charge Julian Assange and try him. As far as libertarian media,
Adam has a show.
I don't know.
Adam has a show.
Yeah, Adam versus the Man on YouTube. My biggest exposure to libertarian media comes through Ron Paul. And this was literally the issue where he says, I can no longer stand behind President Trump. So libertarian media, if they follow the same cues as Ron Paul does, are absolutely not in support of anything that's going on anymore. So that really pulled the curtain down for a lot of people.
Yeah, Ron Paul has done multiple videos since the arrest in April on Julian's situation, and seems to be doing a fair job of updating his followers on that.
He does a better job than anyone else. So I think, as a super old, cripply man who you can see literally like breaking down in the end of his life to spread information, he does a better job than the 20 and 30-year-olds that are making YouTube videos. So props to that man.
Yeah, I think the pressure definitely needs to be put on that, people need to continue to talk about this. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kendra.
No, not at all. I was just going to say that Ron Paul is actually how I found Cato's on Twitter, because he retweeted her article that she had wrote right after Assange was arrested. But yeah, he's been an adamant and vocal supporter and against this from the beginning. That's it.
Okay.
So what are some libertarian sources? This is a question like to the chat and to the group. Like, what are some good media places for us to actually find libertarian media? Because I don't have a big exposure to it.
So I'm a little bit cautious on saying like where people should go to get libertarian media, because I guess we should. I don't know, because aren't we supposed to remain sort of like a little bit politically neutral to kind of keep labels away from the vigils?
We talk about all the left-wing media.
Like a popular libertarian online publication is Reason.
Okay.
I'm not advocating the magazine. I am not a sponsor of it, nor are they sponsors of this show. It's just when my libertarian friends post something, more often than not, it's coming out of reason.com. So that's what I would suggest. And then I'm sure you can find you can always go to Adam Kokesh's Twitter and ask him for sources. I'm sure he would be happy to provide like even 1 or 2 that aren't his show.
Yeah, and the only other one I can really think of is like Media Monarchy and the Corbett Report, but they're not really libertarian. They're more like anarchism. So it's, yeah.
I follow the Facebook page called Being Libertarian. They're not really a media outlet, but they do post a lot of libertarian news, and they post some amazing memes. So yeah, I would say our libertarian media sources are pretty slim right now. Hopefully we can get more.
The free market already decided that there's enough. Like, what happened there?
Oh, that's great.
That's about how that went down. I would like to get into this earlier question from Propaganda. Quinn says, do you think the extradition and lack of Australia helping Julian is from the fact that they are a Commonwealth nation? I've read it's ultimately up to the Crown and not Australia. So this is an interesting path to walk down, because if you look at the Five Eyes nations, it's the UK, Canada, the US, Australia, and New Zealand, all of which were at one point subject to the Crown.
This is something that Alex talked about last time she was on. Alex Candles for Assange on Twitter, for those who don't know her. About how New Zealand people don't really realize it, even those living in New Zealand, that they're not a country, they're a colony of England. 100 years ago, Australia broke British power, but did the same thing that the US did, which was break the power and then completely give over the power once they won their revolution against them. So they're in a situation where they don't even have a constitution or a bill of rights that frames out what a free press is. They had just tradition of not going after journalists. And now that the US has paved the way for attacking journalism, they've actually started arresting journalists, going in and having the ability to literally edit news and information inside of newsrooms. So it's something that they have a revolution that they still have to go back and finish because they're not there yet.
Well, and that happens here, but it happens more from the fact that American journalists get the majority of their news from Reuters or AP Europe. And then from there, it's disseminated to the larger networks and the larger print media outlets. And those three sources are 100% dictated to by a member of an intelligence agency or one of their spokesweasels. The majority of the information that people get, and again, there's only 6 companies that own 95% of American media, and I understand that in the UK they have only a handful of corporations that own the majority of their media outlets that aren't state media. From 3 sources that are all very, very carefully directed and dictated in, information. So to get outside of that and to present a narrative counter to that, you are literally combating 95% of all American media. And it's it it can get a little bit I guess discouraging, but we know that we're right and we know this information is accurate. I don't think this was the original question that I was being asked. I do want to go back to the whole
So
oh, go ahead.
as I mute and unmute myself like 500 times. So Propaganda said we should focus on networking with other channels on YouTube like gamers, etc., etc. I reached out, and ActionForAssange's YouTube page is officially part of the YouTubers Union. It's something that recently formed in Germany, starting with the Slingshot channel, which is one of the biggest entertainment channels, or was for a really long time. And they're working with a legitimate, one of the oldest unions that have existed in Germany. It's a steel union, I believe, or like a metal workers union. And they have actually got Google or YouTube or whichever company to agree to actually sit down to enter into collective negotiation. So that's something that I think is super, super huge, and it's a really good way to network YouTubers behind the scenes through that channel. So I would recommend trying to get every YouTuber you know and can talk to or DM involved in that. And I'll put the link out on our Twitter for those, but it's awesome. Like if we can get tons and tons and tons of independent media into that, that just creates so much more power behind the scenes for people to be able to network and share information too.
And I
So I
think
think
as
that would be
long as
really
the Young
important.
Turks don't participate, we'll know that it's a legitimate operation.
Well, yeah, it's for independent media and independent YouTubers,
Well,
not
yeah,
people
you got
sponsored by the DNC.
You definitely have a point on that one. And that's something I need to look into as well. To circle back to the Australia and the decision ultimately being up to the crown. Australia has gone and supported journalists who were being held by other countries before. They've stuck their neck out for their own journalists before. This is an occasion where it's how did Julian described it himself as process or punishment as the process, and that's what this is. Australia has basically, and I hear this from friends of mine that are in Australia, is basically adopted America as its patron style of governance, and American influence, military influence, intelligence agency influence in Australia has ballooned and just blew up over the last decade or so.
And we saw that with the raids too in Australia.
Yeah.
Once we started to do that, they started to take our lead and, mimic what we were doing.
And those
really
raids
showed the
were
ripple
specific.
effects that the United States, and it was just very indicative of the power that we have, and our actions are, people followed the lead, and yeah.
Those raids were specifically about war crimes committed in Afghanistan by the Australian government. So it was making a very clear statement of, if you talk about our war crimes or you talk about people who've talked about our war crimes, we're busting in your office door and arresting you because these are state secrets. And they don't have any protection beyond just trying to get people to support them and demand like actual free speech and freedom of the press rights. So like with Australia, we shouldn't. There's people there trying to do a Bring Julian Home campaign, which I think is awesome and it needs to be done. But at the same time, we have to remember we're facing a home country here that doesn't want Julian back to begin with and has no political will to do it until it's made an issue there.
Yeah, so Soraya, who I think is in Australia or New Zealand, said that since the coup in '75, all Aussie governments have been puppets. Propaganda, Quinn is asking, could we crowdfund for tickets on The View or something and disrupt live TV? That was good. I was thinking this is going to be like a serious question, but that was funny.
I don't think they do that show live. I think that's taped.
It may be. I don't know.
Or at least they've got they've at least got a standard 7-second delay, if not an extended 12. So that would be it would be an exercise in stamina in terms of outrunning security, and then you'd maybe, it's The View, you'd probably get edited out. I would rather go outside in front of the audience while they're waiting outside before they get to file into the studio, and I would flyer them up or like get as many yellow ActionForAssange wristbands out there on them or whatever. I'd pepper the audience before they went in. That's how I'd do that.
Yeah, we'll just do it. We did the Jimmy Dore show, but they would edit it. It would not be met with kindness by any means. So, but yeah, I mean that's an example of an audience of people that is looking for one view, literally in one view only. I think it was Adam or maybe you, Andrew, that said literally all of them have the same exact perspective, except there's like one blonde like right winger, and that like constantly rotates. Like it's always it was Elizabeth Hasselbeck, then it's there was somebody else, and then now it's Meghan McCain, but there's always that position that they have to fulfill because it's entertainment, right? It's entertainment.
That's what I know about The View, because I've heard a couple of different comics do that. Like there's a token blonde right winger, and they rotate them out because they eventually say something like too dumb or too racist, and they have to find a new token blonde right winger. And like that's the business model. and then there's Whoopi Goldberg and the other two.
Yeah, there's always one that's like kind of like neutral, or not neutral, but somebody that's just like not very strong in their opinions either way. And then of course there's Whoopi and then Joy that are more left leaning or more establishment left. Before we do close out though, I want to make sure that we give you, Kendra, some final a final moment to give some thoughts, and also let everybody know any actions that Free Assange Denver has planned for the future, or where everybody could find you and your organization.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I love that you guys are doing these vigils. They're just important and awesome. So we have our Twitter at DNVFreeJA. And then our email address is DenverAction2 freeja@protonmail.com. And then we have 2 events coming up. We're doing an event in solidarity with the Belmarsh protest, the Belmarsh rally. So that'll be September 28th. And then also we'll be having another rally on October 11th. So those are our next 2 events coming up. We just got some welcome letters and our black and white flyers, which we email out to all of our the people who we already have signed up so that they can print. And so yeah, we hope that if anybody's around Denver, that they will come and join us. Or if you're interested in another state, I mean, there's a lot of avenues open to you, and I'd love to hear from anybody, even if you're just want to talk to another Assange supporter. Send us an email. So thank you.
Yeah, Kendra, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, because I did get to meet you when I was in Colorado, and I got to meet the crew, and everybody's just wonderful. And it was just great to, be with, other people who feel the same way. And so, yeah, what you guys do is great, and everybody is so determined, and you guys are really organized too. Like, you have everything, all your graphics are like laid out, and I mean, you do a really nice job. So you guys deserve so much credit, and we all really thank you for coming on. You do a fine job, and you are welcome back at any time. So to the panelists, or not panelists, but co-hosts, any last updates from you guys? Important dates coming up? Anything going on in your lives with your activism that you want to address before we do close out?
Yeah, so there are a few events happening this weekend. There's one in Germany and Mexico City, yeah, in Mexico. And the 3 cities that are holding weekly events that we help promote, Unity for J. I believe Berlin is still doing their weekly events, San Francisco, New York City. They each hold weekly events, and we've been tweeting those out. September 28th is another big day, like Kendra mentioned, with the Belmarsh rally. A lot of other cities are also holding rallies. San Francisco is, Sydney is going to, Denver, like Kendra mentioned. And then the next big day is October 11th. So again, if you're planning any events, please tag me, tag Unity for J. We'd love to help promo and get the word out on Twitter. Yeah, and even if it's just a small event, we still want to help you. If you need help with graphics, we would definitely love to help promo you.
All right, so we're lagging. We were trying to come up for some behind the scenes info. We're trying to come up with our order to close this out. We really need some help, honestly, with how we close this out every time. But anyways, I don't really have any updates. I mean, I've been calling the New York Times to figure out what's going on with them. They will not answer the phone. They will not call me back. I don't think they will. So maybe you guys could help me out. Again, it's like not a huge deal, but it's just very irritating that they're putting this article out that's very similar to mine. And yeah, they're getting, credit for it. And more importantly, if the article was thorough, I wouldn't have an issue with it. It's not thorough, and it's one-sided. So make some noise if you care about that and are into that. I did make a video about it. But yeah, I don't have really any updates. Just kind of echoing what Christy said with the certain dates. Be aware of that. Follow Unity4J on Twitter. Follow action_4Assange on Twitter. You can also follow me personally on Twitter at _Taylor Hudak. And you could visit our website, action4Assange.com. And I think our site is back up and working again. And yeah, so, and you could also follow Christy at, I'm just going to do her, Christy at Christy MKD84. All right, I will toss it over to, everybody's laughing right now in this stream. I'm so sorry. That's why I'm trying to hold it together.
So,
I'm Taylor Hudak. Andrew or Steve, I will hand it to you.
so I just want to say too, don't forget to write letters to Julian and Chelsea. Super important, and it's how that they know that they're still having support out there, and it just gives them, when they get them, those little glimpses of hope. So I just want to put that out to everybody: is don't forget letters to Assange, and don't forget to write Chelsea at the same time. And there's a bunch of other whistleblowers like Reality and Jeremy that also need support, because they are the ones who ultimately are forgotten. So, and by Edward Snowden's book too, so that can stay up on the top charts. But over to you, Steve.
Gotta
So,
unmute.
there you go,
Sorry
Steve.
about
Okay.
that. No, I just had to unmute myself there for a minute. If you are unfamiliar with me, my name is Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day. You can find that on YouTube at youtube.com/Slow News Day podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Slow News Day Show. I also have a Patreon. If you become a regular viewer of the show and decide that you would like to help it on the sustainability end, that is patreon.com/Slow News Day. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. And I hope I can do it live, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I will be interviewing Gordon Dimmick. And then tomorrow night, I will be interviewing the Twitter personality known as Pat the Burner, also known as Nate's Liver, formerly known as Peter Douche's liaison. He's a fantastic human being, and we always have really good talks. But if you would like to see some of the interviews, I have interviewed amazing people like John Kiriakou and Whitney Webb and Elizabeth Foss and Cynthia McKinney. And I encourage you to do so. And I just want to let everyone know that I love you all, and I thank you so much for being a part of this. It is for an incredibly tragic reason that we come together, but we come together in support and to go forth and make action.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we do, laugh and we have a good time doing these vigils, but at the end of the day, it is a very serious issue that we are dealing with. Or not dealing with it, we are, talking about every week, and it's something that needs to be talked about. And we're really happy to have you guys in the chat and the viewers watching, join us every Wednesday at 10 p.m. and watch this with us. And we appreciate all of your feedback as well. But before we do close out again, we did mention that this is February 25th. That's when the hearing is going to be. So again, make sure that you're really pushing, to do some really important actions for Julian, and make sure you're getting out there and going to your community events and bringing the message to bigger groups of people. And with that also being said, considering the hearing is approaching, and we know that the mainstream media probably won't do the greatest job, and that's an understatement when it comes to covering the case, we are definitely thinking about potentially going there. It would be great to be there, live stream there, and be able to provide you guys with the truth about what's really going on. So again, do let us know if you're interested in seeing us do that for you guys, because that would be, a great opportunity to really show what's happening. But thank you guys so much for watching us, and we will take suggestions as well when it comes to the closing of this show in this vigil. But thank you guys so much for tuning in.